Okay, call to order of the Berlin Finance Committee meeting. Open session public meetings are subject to being recorded. Your image and voice will be recorded. All right, let's get the first order of business being the minutes. So I know you weren't here, Cliff, last week, so do we have a motion for the minutes?
I move to accept them.
Okay, I second that. Any other discussion on that? Okay, roll call, Scott, aye.
Mary, I.
Julie, I.
Okay. I can't vote. Yep, passes 3-0. All right. Wait, let's see, do we have, Julie's here. Do you know, is Megan?
They should be here any minute.
And Carol will be here too?
Correct.
Okay. While we're waiting for that, I will get some information to Mary.
Kristen's been sending me a few things, Scott.
Yeah, I'm taking pictures of all of them and sending them to her, Scott.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, you're all set.
All right, so just a quick review of what we do have. So the first item on this packet here. So last Thursday, I went and visited with Carol and Michael Wood, who's the finance person right now filling in, and got some additional information. So what you have here is the fiscal 25 revenue numbers covering all three schools. There's my writing on the right-hand side. We'll discuss that a little bit here. The second one is what June gave to us. This was the assessment numbers. Again, the Berlin assessment as it originally came on May 31st, 2023 was incorrect. It had incorporated the $350,000 that were the schools were adding from circuit breaker and school choice. So the actual assessment was $4,307,149, which is written on the right-hand side. There's even, I'm not sure if the assessment was correct. I know there was a $1 error. I'm not sure if it was actually showed up in the assessment, but we'll discuss that too. Next, these, again, I requested from Carol and Michael, first of all, was getting the budget numbers like we had received, more detailed for the FY 23, 24, and 25. They had sent it to us for BMS only up until just a moment ago for 24 and 25. We were waiting for fiscal year 23. This was just, unfortunately, this is district-wide, but this was the very broad, let's say, not very detailed categories that were we had for fiscal year 23. These were actually ones that were given to us when school committee met before us back in December. Next is a packet of 4 pages, and this will be in discussion regarding the Bridges program and the costs. These are the employee benefits. They just recently had open enrollment, so you can get a breakdown of the exposure on the benefit side to the 3 additional employees that were added, since none of those costs were shown in the other breakdown for what it is on the Bridges program. And those will be used with the other page, which again is the initial breakdown we were given on the costs on the Bridges program and where the money went on the special education tuition that was was put in for sped to out district tuition at a year ago for this fiscal year. All right, so you have all those to Mary?
Yep.
Do you have all those, Mary, now?
Yes, Scott, but I can tell you, getting all this at the last minute, I'm not sure that I'm equipped to absorb or do anything with this information.
Yeah, that is obviously a big problem coming in. The email came in 3 minutes before 7:30, so it's going to be hard to digest any of this information. But let me start with one piece, and that is regarding funds that were used for the Bridges program and how that breakdown was made. Let's see here. And you have my notes on the page. So this is, I'm bringing up the single page. It has, the boxes at the bottom. There's 3 horizontal boxes titled expenses related to the one-time funds. Make it look like this.
Would it be possible, Scott, for Julie and I to get a copy? Hi.
Sure. Actually, you could, the two of you can come up.
Sure.
Is
Carol, be on her
Carol
way. I know
here?
you said 7:40, she's probably on her way.
I have one extra.
We can
if
share
you
it.
guys don't mind sharing.
Sure. You like to share? Yeah, that's fine. I'm just gonna see where Carol, okay?
Yeah.
Great. Is she, hopefully she's on her way. Okay. Yeah, I saw this one. Have you seen this, Julie?
Yeah, so this
Oh,
also
yeah.
combines with the
All right.
the letter that was also, there's a 3 pages regarding May 17th, 2024. And the first section discusses the last paragraph, special education savings and net budget impact of the Bridges program, and indicating is a savings of $340,000 in FY '25 as compared to FY '24. So what I wanted to get an understanding is how those numbers were calculated, because I had a discussion with Carol and Michael Wood, and the breakdown of those numbers seemed to be taken from 2 things. One, it was looking at the out-of-district special education that was budgeted for FY '24 versus FY '25, which showed a difference of $510,000, and then it subtracted the $174,000 that was listed as a Bridges classroom staff, which is the teacher, the paraprofessionals, supplies, equipment, is how it was broken down.
Tell me, all right, so say that again, you had the question. All right, so you're
Yes.
talking about the memo that we sent?
Yes, of how the $340,000.
For BMS? Yeah, this memo, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, this is what Julie and I worked on with Carol. Okay, so, you want to understand how this $340,000?
Yes.
340,000 was calculated. All right, so that was. It's 86,000 for the occupational and physical therapist. I think this breaks down to 340. Hold on. I have to get my glasses, you guys. I left them in the car.
Yeah, it seemed to be taking the salaries of the teacher. Apparently, there's 2 full-time, or 2 employees, paraprofessionals, up to 2 other paraprofessionals as contracted services.
You're looking at the savings.
Yes, how it was, the savings was calculated.
All right, so I think the way we calculated the savings, hold on, I'm just gonna grab my calculator. Sorry, because we've done 10 things since then, so now this is out of my brain. I believe we looked at, so there was a $510,000 savings, if you look at that last page.
Yes.
Okay. But it cost us $85K more for the special ed paraprofessional salaries. So we minused out $85K. We had to hire an OT and a PT, which is $86K. And there's your $340. So it's the $510.
Those 2 numbers you just had, were those the 174, 110? As listed on this page here.
Oh. Yeah, that's close. Yeah. There's probably like a stipend or something in here.
Okay, because
Yeah, when you take the 86 plus the 85, you've got 171.
okay, so a few things, and
Does that make sense?
Well, that's what we came up with, that's what Michael thought was how the numbers were calculated.
Yeah, that's exactly what we did.
So, understand, okay, if that's, just want to get confirmation, which basically significantly understates the cost or savings. A few things. One is, well, first of all, the 174,000, what it adds up in the salaries,
Yeah.
was the salaries only up to that point when the student thing was generated May 10th. It wasn't actually the full year salaries.
No,
So
what's
it-
in the FY twenty-five budget right now is a full, you mean the difference?
Yeah, the 174,110, which only adds maybe another, if you figure it's up through 10 months, you can do a rough estimate, you're looking another 17,000. So it puts it around 195,000. The other piece of that stuff is part of the savings calculated are the students that actually left the program, that why we even in the first place added that additional funding a year ago. So you're counting savings for the Bridges program for students that actually left the district that wouldn't be there in the first place. So the Bridges program really had no impact on that particular savings.
So, but the Bridges program is so volatile, so kids can come and leave, and I wish Janelle was here because she explained it so wonderfully. So we actually had more children, we have other children that have come into that program. And obviously, we can't discuss individual.
Well, we don't worry about
yeah.
it, actually,
But in
but-
general, I think what's happening is, even though kids are leaving, more kids are coming in. And I think part of this savings has to do with the way the circuit breaker was applied as well. Because in FY '25, we applied our circuit breaker to that line as well. And we got more, we applied more for the FY '25 budget because we got more because the expenses were higher, right?
Well, that's the thing, you're trying to figure out where that was,
It
the.
was netted against that line, the
Because
circuit breaker.
the expenses, I mean, first of all, the circuit breaker funds would be only coming in for FY '25 for what would have been spent in FY '24. Because they're always a
I think
year.
it's FY '23, so that the circuit breaker is, some of it is FY '23 and some is FY '24 that's being applied in FY '25.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know what I'm saying?
Regardless of where the dollars started from there. So, but reimbursement of what was spent in FY '24. So in FY '24, there was the expectation that a certain amount of funds were going to be, have to be expended for out-of-district special education.
Yes.
If that had been expended, you do get reimbursement from the state for the circuit breaker. There would have been some percentage.
Yes,
right,
yeah, a percentage of that, yeah.
Of that stuff. So when the Bridges program was generated, though you put it all into the special education teachers and that stuff, which isn't reimbursed by the state.
Right.
So one of the things we lost, well, what we don't have is a calculation of what are additional money we would have gotten back from that, that's not calculated also into your savings. Because it's, right,
Oh, I
because
see what you're
the
saying.
expense isn't as, because again, you're looking at, you said your out-of-district special education numbers is down over in FY '25.
Right now,
But
yes.
part of that is, I mean, if, because those funds weren't expended in there, you're gonna get less circuit breaker money back in FY '25.
Right. So I completely agree with you, and I hear that. I think part of, and again, the school committee is, and Cliff, you'll know this because you were on the committee, part of it is about the money, but the other part of the vote, why we approved the Bridges program, was because it's actually better for these children to be in school with their peers. So while this specific year, because the school may not right now, or what's in the budget right now is not, we don't have like 10 kids that are needing the services right now. Right now, it looks like, yes, maybe starting the Bridges program was not financially a better thing, right? I'm not disagreeing with you on that. But from an emotional and a social standpoint, which is another thing that the committee had to take into consideration in the vote, it is the best thing for the children, which was the recommendation for the principal. So this is extremely volatile. It could change at any time. We could get children that are coming in the district during the year. We just don't know that. And here's somebody that might be able to speak a little bit better to that. Right there, Carol. I got you a chair.
You can put that down, yeah.
Okay.
Sit there, yeah, that's fine.
I'll give her a minute to get in, but in a nutshell, I wanted to say this about the Bridges. Some years, having the Bridges program is gonna save the school money. Some years, it might actually cost the school money because we might not have children that need the Bridges program, and we might actually still have children that still need to go out of district, right? And some years it might save the school money.
And that's probably what I really want to get to on this point, because one of the things I saw that this particular letter that said there's savings of $340,000, I also know was sent out to the school district parents, I guess, in a regular
The memo right here.
memo that
Yes.
was
Yep.
sent out to them. And what's clear is that, I mean, the 340,000 number, first of all, seems to be, well, highly inflated for going through for this year. Besides, one of the other numbers one I mentioned too was, well, the other number that's not listed there is with the 3 new additional employees, there's easily $100,000 exposure to benefits. That's also not listed there. Again, we don't know what the benefits will be because
No,
that
it's
number
here.
isn't listed.
No,
We-
it's,
we
yeah,
got
it's
the-
a different line, but it's in here. I mean, if you look at line,
Well, that's combining everything together. You don't know what the exposure of the 3
the 3
employees,
specific, I
right.
completely agree.
Right.
Yep.
And only reason I came up, the approximate 100,000, I said exposure, because Carol provided me, they just had open enrollment, so they provided me, the information, and of course, the big thing is always the health insurance. And it was taking, the example of if you took the, highest family plan with 3 people, then you combine, you got dental, vision. So there's exposure of up to $100,000, which we don't know, could obviously be 0 for all we know on it, but there is that other exposure and that cost. So I guess my issue was, one is obviously the benefits weren't accounted for. It doesn't account for what we would have gotten back in circuit breaker money, which I know wouldn't be an exact number, but it also would be something that would be the general number that you need to somehow apply something to. And likewise, that the key piece of the reason the huge school choice out of district tuition for SPED was so high for FY24 was that exposure to 4 kids, which was told that it was going to be exposure of over $600,000, which is why the agreement we came about at the end of the year. And of course, obviously, we know those students left. There's some, we don't know what level of other churn in there, and just taking that 510,000, which I know, my concern is the message that's been put out there is vastly inflating what the savings are, and it's also putting, I think, a false message out there to the public on saying that there's a $340,000 savings from 24 to 25. If you can show me I'm wrong on any of that, I'd love to see more details to indicate that, but.
I think it's about a $340,000 savings because, now correct me if I'm wrong, I think, in general, people that come in as paraprofessionals, a lot of them don't need benefits.
Well, yes, we understand. That's why I was, there was 3 full-time employees, as I talked to Carol. There's the main teacher, 2 paraprofessionals that are regular teachers that would be benefited, and then up to 2 other paraprofessionals that are contracted services. So that's
Right.
why I only used the 3 employees as the exposure.
Yeah, so, which is fine, but I think the issue too is, you're talking about the circuit breaker, and there's no way to calculate what percentage of circuit breaker we would have gotten if we didn't do the Bridges program and we just sent these kids out of district. Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, what I'm getting.
Obviously, you're correct. There would be a piece of circuit breaker that we would get that would be applied. There's no disputing that. But to say, would it be 10,000? Would it be 50,000? I have no idea because it would depend on where the child would have to go out of district, the cost of that, and then what percentage the state is going to reimburse. So there's no way that we could estimate that. So I think it was just a general comment of there was about $510,000 of a decrease in the out of district. It cost us to hire these 3 people, about $174,000 or $171,000, whatever.
Like
So that's where we
195.
get, yeah, whatever. That's where we get to about $340,000. It's gonna be really hard to get to these exact.
I never said about getting to exact.
Yeah.
I know you have to get to an approximation.
Yeah.
What I think is there was a lot of approximation that was kind of left out of this, and, you know, and leaving, like I said, doing the calculation. I think in the ideal, well, actually, I don't even know if it'd be the ideal case on it, but, you know, the fact that counting like the students that why we were put into this position in the first place, or providing the funding and out there, had left this district. And one of the things that we discussed about that last year, I mean, one of the things when we talked to the administration on it, which, you know, was Carol, Nancy, about, you know, we know that it's very volatile of the kids coming in and out with the special education, district tuition, and you don't know if they're, you know, staying or coming or going. So, but what was indicated that was very unique was the fact that we had 4 students coming into a small district like BMS. So I guess the question there is, are you saying that we had 4 districts leave, but we also, you know, lightning struck twice, and we had 4 more that would be coming in of that same exposure?
It was 4 new students last year, right, Carol? So that there could have been other kids that were already
Right, in the
placed
program,
on-
right.
in the program, yes.
Yeah, and because they're,
Incoming kindergarten
was-
for students for the fall.
It was 4 new students is what
Yes,
hit
yes.
us in April or whenever we were doing the budget.
was March,
And that was,
yeah.
okay, so I think that was, the situation there.
right, like say, I mean, more of my concern is like, it's incorporating the savings of the students that left and saying the Bridges program is responsible for this, and we don't, that's not a valid statement, especially since they were a bulk of what the expense was, that why we provide the additional funds. So I know I've been speaking quite a bit on this
So
particular part.
can I ask a question then? If we
Sure.
can, so
Yeah.
can we just, with the students that are in there, if we did place them out, can we just do those numbers?
No.
You mean to how much it would cost to outplace those students?
Janelle estimated at $85,000 during one of our
Ballpark.
open meetings.
That's
There
an
was-
average
Right, but that's an
cost.
average, so I'd rather like,
And that's not transportation costs.
right,
But the 4 students that were coming in were 4 incoming kindergartners so it's not a new family of 4 kids came into the district, those, I guess, left, but, so those are incoming kindergartens, so that's why the Bridges program, it was thought to do that investment, because 4 times 85,000 is whatever, plus the addition of for transportation, if we weren't able to keep it in the district. Sorry.
I mean, at the end of the day, I think, you know, if I hear what you're saying, Scott. You're saying this is misleading, but all this is doing, so what number is fact is $106,670. That's the decrease in your BMS budget from FY24 to FY25. These bullets underneath it, and sorry, I keep losing my voice. These bullets underneath it are trying to approximate how we get to that $106,000, right? So we have a $340K savings, and then we have increases of 76.5, 91.5, 37K, and then another increase in 27K, right? So the summary isn't trying to say, oh, look, we're saving you $340,000. The point of the summary is saying, fact, if you look at the numbers, right, total budget, total expenses for fiscal 24 is 624,390.60. Sorry, I don't have a total here. Sorry, total for fiscal 24 is $5,283,791. That's the total expense for fiscal 24 that was budgeted. Total expense budgeted for fiscal 25 is $5,177,184. That is a decrease in $106,670. These bullets underneath in this memo of approximately 340K savings and then the additions, it's just to kind of show you what that 106K is broken up of. So if that you feel is overstated, then some of these increases are also overstated. It's not meant to mislead. It's just kind of to give people an idea of this is how we got to this 106K. I'm not disagreeing with you. I think we were trying to simplify. So if it's maybe oversimplified, I get it, and I'm not disagreeing. But that's all that's meant to it's just meant to explain where the negative 106 came from. Do you know what I'm saying?
Unfortunately, you have.
Yeah, sorry,
my
I'm sorry.
copy on that particular one. The negative 106 being calculating the, between the total budget the 5,283 versus 5,177?
Yes, that's the decrease in the Berlin Memorial. We're just talking BMS. That was the decrease in the expense. So we actually are expending less money in fiscal '25 than fiscal '24 at Berlin Memorial by $106,000.
So that leads me to the next question on that, which is, and this was a question that came up, and the one thing I'm still missing is the FY '24 revenue numbers, or FY '23 revenue numbers, Carol, but I don't think, were the revenue numbers?
You got
in there?
FY '23 right here.
And I sent that, is that the one I sent tonight?
Yep.
You actually have it. I
For
didn't just send
that
it.
are broken down by BMS?
No, it's district.
Yeah, that's this. I do have,
I think he wants it by BMS, or by schools, not district.
so I was trying to understand this piece here too, on how, and again, this is because not having all the numbers here, have to do some of the calculations. So using this sheet that says FY '25 revenues,
Yeah.
for, again, we're just gonna talk about BMS on this particular one. The town contribution has the assessment being for the 4,508,000, the Medicaid, which is just under 7,000, Chapter 70, 590,000, and transportation, which is the also Chapter 71, of 72,000, where you come up with a 5,177,184. It doesn't mention anything of school choice or.
Already applied, it's applied in that town contribution line. Because what we did with school choice is we actually applied it to the budget. So school choice was applied, if you look in your, the memo that you have, we don't show school choice, it's included in the 4,508,106. So what we did is, it was applied to the general ledger. School choice was applied to the salaries line item, and circuit breaker was applied to that out of district line item.
Okay, because what I'm looking at here is when you do FY '24, which is my writing, is that the copy? My writing on the right-hand side?
Yeah.
Yeah, this. So FY '24 showed, of course, the Chapter 70 being 540,000. It had, I think it's transportation, Chapter 71,
yeah, that's
82,000.
transportation,
It was 4,000, or excuse me,
40?
it's 4,000, not 40,000.
Okay.
Yeah, look, there is an extra zero there, but it is 4,000. Medicaid, and then in order to get, and of course, the assessment was 4,307,149, which required the additional 350,000 from the circuit breaker school choice to end up with the 5,283,792. So that wasn't applied in there.
You're right, because that was reserves that we actually took out of those revolving accounts to apply to the budget. So that was a separate vote the committee had in April after we passed the budget. And what we did is we voted to take money out of the reserves, which we agreed you can't do year over year because you will deplete your reserves, right? Circuit breaker and school choice are revolving funds. So, if you're taking more than what's coming in every single year, you won't have anything left. You'll be negative, right? So what we did to meet the gap in Berlin, we did not do this in Boylston, we did this in Berlin to meet the gap last year, is we used $350,000 from our revolving funds. That wasn't like actually the circuit, there was other circuit breaker, I believe, that would have been applied throughout the budget as well.
There was right, I mean, the original amounts was, going by this was the agreement sheet of what was, there was originally supposed to be school choice of 176,062, with additional 225,000 was added to bring it to 401,000. Circuit breaker was originally 275, additional 125 was applied to bring it to 400,000. That's regarding to BMS, and the 125, 225 additions were total up to the 350. So, when also next piece trying to understand is, in this fiscal year, so there was, we provide the extra 383,000. There's the additional 350,000.
Fiscal 24,
Right,
yep.
it's this fiscal year.
Yep.
The extra 350,000. And originally, when one of the things that was described to us too was like the startup cost for the Bridges program. And one of the things, well, one of my thoughts were way back when we first learned about this was the Bridges program got started during the school year, which we found out it got started before the school year. It was approved before the fiscal year had even started. It was June of last year. And then when you looked at the breakdown of costs, the only thing that showed about any type of startup costs was some expenses of like $26,000. So when you start adding up, what was spent in actual out-of-district special education tuition, which you have those numbers listed there from the kids that left the district and the ones that were still in the district, which also it was a smaller number. One of them was incorporating a student that's at Tohoto.
Yep.
When you start adding all up that stuff up, it seems to show that there's a significant amount of money that's not being spent of the additional funds that were applied to the budget. So what I'm trying to understand too, and this was a discussion I had with Michael on this, and I've been talking with you, Carol, and I had this conversation with you, Julie, from the select board meeting the week before, was it seems like there's a significant chance for significant excess of deficiency available at the end of this year, which I know you can't use anything for us for FY25. But looking at what was additional funds that were allocated, I mean, is there some other major expenses that came up that would have eaten into those funds? Because one of the things I'm looking at that it seems like it's very realistic, you could be looking at like $150,000 of that was unspent. And if that is unspent and you know it's going to go over in excess of deficiency, could the schools look at taking additional $150,000 of school choice, applying it to this year's budget, which would reduce the tax levy by a whole point, and then use the excess and deficiency to roll over back to your school choice funds that you pulled down after this, I think Michael indicates usually like September, October, or something like
Yeah,
that.
the
That would
audit is
be
usually done in September.
when
We
the
usually don't
excess
even
and-
vote on it until
when the excess
December,
and deficiency.
January, yeah.
But is there a way?
Certified sometime in the fall.
But looking at what has been expended to school choice, out-of-district tuition, and transportation is included there, and what was done for the Bridges program, and how much additional funds that were applied to the budget in the agreement late last year, that there seems to be, realistically, there's $150,000, unless there's some other major area that you had expenses to that the money will be applied, that if we can see that there's some excess and deficiency coming because of unspent funds from there, then what can we do to help alleviate the tax impact this year, instead of saying, okay, we wait for the excess deficiency, we have the big tax impact this year, and then finally get a chance to look at it in FY26?
I don't know that we're gonna have excess, or I haven't seen the books. I don't have access to the GL. I don't know where we stand for fiscal '24. The books aren't even closed yet, right? We've got 30 more days, 35 more days. So, I mean, I have no idea what that's gonna look like. So that would not be a prudent or responsible decision to spend down more cash, right? We've already taken $250,000 from E&D. We're applying that to Tohoto. So that's applied evenly, Berlin, Boylston. We've also applied $100,000 of school choice to BMS. We've only applied $45,000 of school choice to Boylston Elementary, which has 100 more children. So I think we've given as much cash as we can to this budget. And unfortunately, I was not involved in whatever happened last year with expending cash to pay for heads, but as an accountant and a finance professional, I don't think that was a good idea. I never agreed on that. I remember we voted on it as we need to do this to make the budget happen, but maybe it would have been better last year if you guys took a little bit of a tax hit and then another little bit of a tax hit. I don't know what else to say. I hear you. I hear the taxes are gonna go up substantially this year because we used cash to
Well,
fund
actually,
the
the thing
budget.
is, we did take a tax hit last year. We went from 2.5 to 4.
Yeah, we went to 4.
cover the school last year.
Yeah, there was an extra
In
$200,000.
Well, it wasn't
that
just the school, it must have been other things.
No, it was the school.
No,
school.
no, it was the school.
was the school.
Absolutely with the school.
It was the school.
Only
So
the
nothing else
school.
increased last year?
Yes, there were
Not to
other
that- not
increases.
to
We-
require-
Everything
Yeah.
have increases in your fire or your police?
Everything else fit into the 2.5. We originally had, was it a 5% increase budgeted for the schools?
I don't recall right
And
offhand.
then, so we originally had, I think it was 5.5, and then when the school budgets came in, you guys said you needed even more money. And it ended up being a combination of the extra 1.5% plus using the free cash to help with the 4 out-of-district students.
Yeah, because we were at, so we applied an extra $200,000 from the levy to the schools, combination of BMS, Tohoto, and that gave us both BMS and Tohonto's overall budget increase. One was, I think it was, Tohoto was like 8.9 and BMS was 9.2. Then when the additional funds were requested when the out-of-district special education, the extra $383,000 resulted in BMS's increase going up nearly 20%.
And we had to cut some of the supplemental requests to the budget as well.
Well, yes, we
So
basically.
some of the other departments, we actually had to cut in order to hit the school last year, hit the school budget last year.
So I hear you, and at the end of the day, this number, I don't have the paper anymore, you have it, the number, so we have Berlin Memorial, I know we just got Tohoto, so let's just take that out of the equation. That number for Berlin Memorial, that 5.1 million, right? That's what it's going to cost to run that specific school. I didn't just make that number up. That's something that John Campbell sat with our finance director and sat with Carol. He got input from the teachers. That's what it's gonna cost to run that school. I hear you that the taxes are gonna go up. I do taxes for a living. That's what I do. I'm a CPA. I own my own business. I try to avoid taxes like the plague. That's my job, right? I do people's taxes and I try to make them as low as possible within staying within the law. So I get it. But at the end of the day, the schools are saying this is what we need to run the schools. And if we don't get this, this is what we're going to cut. And at the end of the day, I feel both sides, and this is why we're going to this town vote,
Can I
because
say
the
something?
community
Meg?
has
Because
to.
This is why all of us kept going to your meetings and saying, please come and talk to us. Because the time to get any other money out of our budget was before town meeting. Because when we were doing the balancing of all the different needs, this was what we did last year. We spent like 3 months talking to all the departments, going through the budgets. And then once we figure out what has to be taken care of, we see where we can add in and do supplemental. And last year, we had to make decisions against other departments, it's really hard. And, it's a very long, difficult process. So one of the frustrating things now is now, here we are after town meeting, getting information that we really needed back in February and March in order to make any sort of decision of even looking at any other departmental cuts to possibly lower the tax rate for members of town. And now it's kind of like the only option we have really is whatever you want out of this budget, it's going to be another tax increase on top of last year's tax increase. And, it's really important. We're doing this important work of really digging in. But when you're talking to us, we're just a couple members here. We're just a couple members of the committee. We're really trying to understand this for the town. But I've had so many people come and talk to me this year about how hard last year's tax increase was. So it's being able to really explain this to the town is what's important. Everybody in town. And I know you talk to the parents, but people outside too. And, I'm really glad you all are here today and we're going through this. But in the end, it doesn't matter too much what we say as a committee. To hit this budget, we're going to have some sort of tax increase.
Right.
And that's what
Well-
and that's what you're going to have to.
Right, and and that's exactly what I just said, and I feel
But what I'm saying, that's not me now. I mean, you're talking to me, but it's not me. It's
No, it's the
entire-
town, right, exactly, and that's why, Julie, that's why I think the best thing is that the town gets to decide. It's gonna be what the town wants to do, it's a town.
We
Okay.
voted
Well-
twice, we've had 2 different amendments come up on the town floor.
Yeah, we didn't give a chance of the vote. So the town would have been going for the override, and that would have gotten the most people to the polls. But I'm not going to go rehash that particular
Yeah.
piece. What it really comes down to is there needs to be
Well, we're following within
we're
the
not
law,
talking.
yeah.
We're not talking about. I mean, we know there was going to be a tax increase.
Yeah.
What's the issue is the massive tax increase with so little transparency of how that tax increase is coming. I mean, I can read. I mean, I don't do any social media. I get things texted to me all the time going on here. People can't figure out what's going on, right? It's like last week we were at this meeting. Now, additional $99,000 just for the 2.5% was sent to BMS, right? There's, I know, a big thread going on around before that going, if there's teacher salary increase, there's a 3%, all this type of stuff. What they gave to the BMS wasn't even enough to cover those. Well, I can understand why people are spreading that around because they don't have the numbers to even figure out what that was until this memo was sent out and you see that the total increase from the salaries was really $76,000. So the $99,000 covered that. I know there's other expenses, but you're seeing
Was it
the
99,000? I don't follow.
well, that's what the increase we applied to the budget recommended from the finance
Oh,
committee.
right, the 2.5% would be $99,000.
Yeah, so my point is, it's just one of those themes that runs wild out there because, and I don't blame the people that are going on it because they don't have numbers to figure out because they looked at the school numbers and going, we can't figure it out either. And that's what we've been trying to tell you from the finance committee. And then, we just mentioned this last year. It started with December, and then after that, it was to get you before our committee to discuss more of this. It felt like we were just falling on deaf ears. That's how people feel about it. And then when I come down to this Bridges program, we start putting out numbers and saying there's $340,000 in savings. And when you start really adding up the numbers and things in this, you realize it's not $340,000 in savings. And just as you admitted, it could be costing us more money in 1 year. It could be saving us money. I agree with that. One thing I do in looking at it was before, one of the problems with out-of-district special education tuition is it can cause spikes, right? It is,
Yes.
and I can understand that this program can definitely take the spikes out of that equation, which is definitely a positive. Unfortunately, one of the things it also seemed to add was before, the floor could be lower than it is now because the Bridges
Yes.
program clearly has raised the floor, so there's now the minimum cost has increased from what it was before. There, like I say, I can see the advantage of it. That can take the spikes out of the program, or out of the cost number, but that it has raised the floor on the program, and so as a result, we don't know if we're saving money or if we're losing money. And, right, over 10 years, maybe it ends up being a wash.
Right.
But I think
Yes.
that's the important point is that really honest number has to be out there. And like I said, I read this thing that says out to parents that said $340,000 savings. We don't know.
For this year. But you're right,
It's
kids
not.
could come in
Well-
and they might need out-of-district services and then we have
But-
no idea.
But the other
that's the
piece,
nature of
but
that.
the other piece of this is part of the, and we had this discussion, if you go, nobody wants to go back and listen to our meetings, but one of the things when we had our discussions
Welcome
on
to the
this,
club.
on this was when we talked about providing that extra $383,000. There was a lot of debate in our committee. One was just to put it as an article that, well, the only way the schools could have gotten the money is if it was used for out-of-district special education. So it would have been an article that if you had expended that money, you have come and gotten it for that reason. And one of the reasons we ended up pushing back from that was we thought, well, we don't need that extra protection for the schools because we've just trusted the schools would be using it for that purpose. And before we even, less than 2 months after town meeting, it was being reconstructed for a different purpose. and with no knowledge to us that it was going to be going into a continuing operating cost. And that's, a big issue of why we have the trust issue and also the concerns about what are the numbers really and how will these things be used. Because even if now you look at it and they said, there's mentioned startup expenses. Well, I don't see really much startup expenses on it, but when you even add up the numbers here, it looks like we still provide a lot more money than what our district special education tuition and the Bridges program were needed for this year. But yet we don't seem to have no way to know that that the books are so bad that we can't figure out, it's not efficient to do this, but so we just have to hit the taxpayers massively. Maybe we'll have and then if we show up with the excess and deficiency, then we can start bringing down the tax bills, or at least apply that to the budget, or let's put it this way, apply that to the budget as opposed to not adding more positions in FY20, when we talk about FY26, right? I mean, eventually we're going to find out what that number is, but it
So
seems
can
like.
I just want to go back to that Bridges thing, because
Yeah.
I feel like there's a misconception. So we voted in June to add a Bridges program. That had nothing to do with the children that came in the district that were out of district. I actually think those kids still went out of district. They couldn't go in the Bridges program. And just so everybody understands, just because we have a Bridges program doesn't mean there will be 0 kids going out of district. There are still going to be children that have strokes or need feeding tubes or have such severe needs that they are going to have to go out of district. There's nothing we can do for that, right? But the Bridges program is meant to take some of those children with moderate needs that may otherwise have had to go out of district, stay with their peers so that they have a better experience being closer to home, being with their peers, and being in a familiar school, right?
Would
So-
this Bridges program have been created if not for the additional $700,000 that was added to the budget?
Yes, because John Campbell had been working on that well before, so I think it was just a coincidence.
That is true.
Yeah, it seems to be the case.
And I
So-
think that the way it was explained, because everybody keeps, there's too many back and forth conversations, and I think the way it was explained, and again, I didn't explain it that way, because I always understood it that we were gonna have these kids, they were gonna go out of district. John brought it to us as like, we've had it at Boylston for years. It's been a great thing.
Well, my
because-
understanding is this is the third year of it, right?
Over in Boylston.
Boylston,
Boylston,
third, fourth,
yeah.
yeah.
It's the
I mean,
third
it's been
year.
there, my son has been, this is his 4th year in Boylston Elementary. It's been there every year that he's been there. So, that was brought to us because we have it in Boylston. We're trying to create some equity across the schools. And the reason why the committee voted for it, or at least, again, I can only speak for myself, but the purpose of that program wasn't to save money. It was to do the right thing by these kids so that they could be with their peers. Nancy had said I don't even remember if we discussed costs at the time. I think we had said we would look for cost savings, or we would try to, wait to do, I can't even remember if we discussed cost. But the proposal that was brought to the committee was to just get the program started in June. Those 4 kids that we had, they still went out of district, and what happened is, unbeknownst to any of us, I believe they moved out of district.
Right,
They were still
yes.
out of district, so they didn't go into the Bridges, and we weren't saying, oh, we know they're going into the Bridges, so we're gonna tell Berlin we need this money, and then we're gonna use it to start a Bridges program, and those kids are gonna leave, and we're gonna keep that money. That was not what happened.
So you had other funds available that you would have used for it?
Can I ask that clarifying question?
Yes.
I do not know how that was funded. I could go back and read the minutes.
Let Cliff-
Okay, Cliff has a question.
Let
Okay.
Cliff ask.
Did you hear what she said?
Okay, because I was not here.
No, you
On the
weren't.
finance committee, so let's, just put that disclosure out there. So, the Bridges program conceptually was in the works in the spring last year.
June.
Is that correct?
Yes, yes,
Conceptually?
yeah,
Was-
Yeah, conceptually, yes,
Okay.
but before it came to the school
Okay,
committee, yes.
and the budget for fiscal year '24, did it, before you came to the finance committee for the additional money, was the money for the Bridges program in the budget that was approved by the school committee?
I don't believe so.
So when you presented your budget, certified, what's the term we use? Certify the budget? Whatever that budget number was in fiscal year '24. It did not include money for the Bridges program, but the concept was being developed.
Oh, yeah.
How'd you expect to pay for it if it wasn't in the budget and you were developing it?
Megan?
I think it was.
Circuit, Jess, could Jess come, Jess is the one that.
Circuit breaker money.
This is
Yeah.
Jessica
We had-
from, yeah.
Sorry. So this came up in June. It was presented to us as,
She just reread the minutes, that's.
sorry,
fine.
yeah, so
Thank
this
you,
was in
Jessica.
June, and I was like, when it came up in the meeting, it was
June
presented
2023.
that we got extra circuit breaker money, and I was specific, I went back in the minutes and clarified and said, with this extra money, we could support expanding this
175K,
program. So there were some already employees that could be absorbed into that program, but it needed, I think, 2 additional employees. And so it was presented to us that way. I said during the meeting, you can look at the minutes, how is this possible? Because we just fought tooth and nail to get this budget in. And so it was presented to us, no, we got this extra money, it can support these, and it will absorb 4 incoming kindergartners who will need extra services. And so will allow us to keep them within district and not send them out of district.
No.
So you said you had more circuit breaker money at that point than you expected, and that's where you had the extra
This is
cash?
what we were
That's what we were told.
Okay.
And that was how you were going to fund Bridges?
That is what we were told. With
Again,
circuit
I-
breaker money.
Okay, so with excess, I'm just trying to understand, because I think you made an interesting point earlier, Megan. They need to be separated, these 2 issues, and I'm trying to sort through that.
Yes.
Okay, so the program was conceived, you voted on it, and you were told by somebody
The director of finance.
that the money, you could actually go ahead and do this program because there would be excess circuit breaker money to pay for it. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
Okay, so that is separate from the 300. Did it turn out you had the excess in the end?
Do we have an excess for
No,
fiscal?
did you have, all right.
Oh, you mean
were-
for fiscal
You were
23?
told there was
To
excess
do-
money that could be used to establish the Bridges program. In the end, did you have?
I don't think so.
I don't
Did
know.
you
I
have-
look. I don't know.
I don't know the
So,
answer to that. I
okay.
actually don't think so.
Okay, and so there was this pot of money that had been established for a different, I'm not trying to play blame game here, I am trying to sort through.
No, and we understand what you're saying,
and
and you
so-
can understand what we've been going through too.
So, using the supposition that perhaps there wasn't enough circuit breaker money in excess?
Yes.
And that the program had already been developed and maybe hiring had gone on, you had the problem of, well, how are we going to fund it?
That's exactly right.
And the 300,000, was it 300,000? I'm sorry.
Well, there was a
383.
combination of
Okay.
383 our side
Okay.
and also
I
350 on our
apologize for
side.
being ignorant, but I wasn't around.
Yep.
Right.
So that, but that money was there, so
Mm-hmm.
that was a tapping source, I'm guessing.
Well, yes, because the children that went out of district actually left. They were out of district for 4 months.
No, I understand, I
And
understand.
then
that.
they
saying.
left, but
I
yes,
see
the
what
money
you're
was
saying.
there.
So
You're right,
suddenly the money
there.
was there.
It was suddenly
lying
there.
fallow,
Yes,
sort of, okay. Now I understand. Thank you.
yes.
Because I was having a hard time sorting through that.
And I think.
And it wasn't
that-
explained well.
That
So, yeah.
particular switching of funds, I don't think ever came before the committee when those funds were applied to that need.
Correct.
Correct.
It wouldn't have had to, because it was all. We
Excess
only have
circuit
to
breaker
vote.
money, wouldn't you have had to vote to?
No,
The 300.
The circuit
The-
breaker
the
we did, but that
383
383 was already included in the budget. So she can, now what comes to us is we get a huge list of budget transfers. There's hundreds of them, right?
Yeah, you
So,
Really? Okay, go ahead.
well, I'm
Wait,
talking
hold on.
across
Through the
3
year, through the-
schools. I'm not
through the
talking
year.
about
We
just
have a-
BMS.
Do you need a clarification?
Can I just get, this money is circuit breaker and you're talking all one-time funding, which was used in an operating budget, so now you've taken something that you got once, you said you have excess, and you used it to create something now that's an ongoing expense.
Circuit breaker is ongoing.
But you've said 1,000,000 times tonight that, exaggerating, I'm sorry, not 1,000,000 times, several times that you never know how much you're getting in.
You don't.
That's true.
So, you've taken this money that's a one-time, and I think this is something that people are really having a hard time understanding. So I'm not talking for myself as much as everybody I've heard. You've taken this money that's one time, and you have put it into the operating budget. Am I,
Well, it's always in the operating budget. All of it's in the operating budget. You guys, the town of Berlin voted it in the operating assessment to use the cash.
Excuse me,
Well-
Scott, can I be recognized to speak,
Yes.
please?
Yes, Mary.
Okay, because I think I'm going to try to keep my words appropriate here. Megan Grill, you said you're a CPA, right?
That is correct, Mary.
Okay, all right. So just want to understand. We're in a situation. I want to go back to top level on this. We're in a situation where this finance committee and the town select board for 2 years running has not seen a budget where you have a column of expenses on one side and a column of revenue on the other side. We haven't seen it from this school committee. All right, so we're down in some weeds. And by the way, I agree with everything that Cliff just walked us through. He just did a great job. And Sue, Terrian in the background, you're exactly right. Now, Megan, you just lectured us for using free cash one time for an operating budget, but that's not what the town signed up for. We signed up for that free cash to close the gap for those 4 students coming into BMS who needed out-of-district funding to the tune of $620,000 estimated.
I don't recall
So
that.
hang
I
on,
had that conversation
no,
with
don't
your
talk
board.
over me. Don't
That's
talk
me.
over me.
Sorry,
I've
Mary.
got the floor right now, please. I've been watching you do that to the other speakers. I will not tolerate it.
That was me, Mary, sorry.
Or whoever's, okay, all right. So I saw the message that went out to Link, that went out about the Bridges program. And it is confusing people because it's not accurate. If you look at what the town voted as an operating budget for fiscal '24 for BMS, we voted operating budget without the free cash emergency funding. That operating budget was $3,924,434. And that, what we voted as a town for an operating budget is $583,672 less than what the fiscal '25 ask is from the school committee for BMS. So the budget didn't go down for BMS. It went up by almost $600,000. And if you want to understand the differential, all you have to do is look at the misappropriation of the Berlin free cash for purposes it was not intended for. And this whole conversation, I feel so sorry for the parents of students who don't have a simple, here's your revenue, here's your expense budget. I have struggled with it. I've struggled with it for 2 years. And Julie Malik on our committee, she said it very well. Where were you in December, in January, in February? We all love the Bridges program. That's not the question. The question on the floor tonight at a finance committee meeting of the town of Berlin is, where's the numbers? What are the numbers? I have not seen a revenue breakdown that is clear and transparent. I spent a lot of time looking at what the state does in circuit breaker. I don't fully understand it, but I know that we qualified both in fiscal '23 and fiscal '24 for some emergency funding out of circuit breaker. Where are those numbers? Where do they fit into the revenue picture for the district? And where is a level services budget showing fiscal '23 to fiscal '24, level services '24 to '25? And the free cash was not meant to be in a level services budget. Sorry. It was an emergency funding that people in the town of Berlin put together because we care about our public schools. And frankly, I'm exhausted by the misinformation and the confusion that's being created. And I'd very much like it to stop. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Barry.
A hand up if you,
Yeah.
Okay.
you do have a hand up online, I just wanted to let you know.
Who was the hand up?
Christie, I can't, I have to go put my daughter
Uh,
to
who?
bed. Yes.
Can I get your name, please, for the minutes?
It's Chris Keefe.
Oh, Christie.
Oh, Chris Keefe. Oh, I thought you said Christie. Sorry.
Sorry.
I just gave you a new name.
I would just like to ask that the questions I put online be answered.
Questions you put online.
That
Oh,
I-
in the chat? Oh, sorry, I wasn't
Yes,
even checking the
please.
chat. Trying to do 8 things at once.
It's hard to do these hybrid meetings.
Oh, yes. Will other districts be allowed to take advantage of the Bridges program?
Well, I don't know what that means. What do you mean, other districts?
Is this only for our districts?
Yes.
Yeah. The one in Berlin
So
is for
it's not-
Berlin Memorial.
But it's not, so it's not for inviting other districts who have issues where maybe they could have their students come to our Bridges program?
Not at this time. I mean, could it be in the future, perhaps?
Only
yeah.
if we school choice kids in, right?
So, and what about the first question that I asked Kristen?
Oh, okay, that said anonymous attendee, so I wasn't sure if that was yours. It says, why wasn't the Bridges program cost out before it was instituted to see if it was going to be an advantage to the district?
What do you mean cost out? Priced out, you mean?
Yeah.
Priced out.
No, to see whether it was going to be on the positive side for the budget or the negative side. If it was going to be a negative side, you would have said, no, thank you.
I don't agree with that. I think that I was looking at it from a perspective of these children that belong in school with their peers. And even if it costs a little bit more, it's morally and ethically the right thing to do as a community. And that
Well,
personally
it's not
is how I looked
morally,
at it.
ethically okay if you're going to take free cash from the town of Berlin that was not supposed to be spent that way. That's why I was asking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
back on that June meeting, the way it was presented, that it was gonna be a cost savings. I agree that the kids should be staying within the district, but there was 4 incoming students that were gonna need higher level services that with the BEMS could not provide at that time. And
With-
I'm sorry,
with
when you
no
say it was presented,
information
who did the
whatsoever.
presenting?
The director
With
of
no
finance.
information.
Okay, that I just
Engine.
wanted to clear.
And people.
to who.
No, yeah,
Yeah, so the pupil personnel director, the principal presented it.
Okay.
And the director of finance probably spoke to it.
Right, I think the goal is always to keep kids in district.
Absolutely.
Right, we
But-
have to, that is always the goal for the kids in the
But-
community.
But you
So
need
if
to
this-
remember that this money was not to be spent that way originally.
and
Right, but we already
the
discussed
vote in
that.
June was not to use those funds, it was to use circuit breaker. So
Right.
it was totally 2 different funds. The 383 was a separate family, separate students. 4 different students were coming into kindergarten, and that's why it
Thank
was
you,
presented
Jess.
at that time.
And my understanding, I'm sorry to interrupt, but my understanding then, as you were doing this, is that somewhere later in the year, that free cash money got transferred to pay for the bridges, but it wasn't called out that that was the change that was being made in the use of the funds to the school committee. Is that how the school committee is seeing this?
Or, well, it wasn't called out to the town of Berlin either.
Well, I think the cash.
Correct on both accounts.
I think the cash, and again, just so we're clear on policy, superintendent comes to the school committee and says, this is what I need to run the schools. The school committee debates and then votes on that budget. The town votes if they're willing to give the assessment, which helps fund the budget. Once the schools have that money, the superintendent and school committee are responsible for making sure that money is used however it is needed. So during the year, which happens, we talked about budget transfers. So things change, right? Anything could change. We needed to refinish the gym floor at Tohoto this year. We had to move money around for that. the school committee vote, the superintendent presents it to the school committee or administrators or whoever, and the school committee votes. It's not the process to say, hey, town of Berlin, we need to transfer this money from here to here, and this money from there to there, and this money from there to there, because this all happened. That's what the school committee is there for.
Chris has a.
Yeah.
So I was directly involved in the discussions about the 383,000 and working with Nancy and Mr. Topman to try to come up with that solution. I think I think the point that's being missed here is we could have taken that 383 and done a separate article and required the district to submit reimbursement every time they needed to use it for that fund. But there was a level of trust and understanding that that was going to be used for the specific purpose that it was designated for. And I think that's where people are feeling the frustration, because we had an understanding of what that money was to be used for. It was last minute to fund an emergency need. I understand what you're saying, Megan. Normally, when line item transfers happen, that does not require approval by the town. But when we go to town meeting and we, broker a last minute deal and it takes $383,000 away from the town, that's for a specific purpose. If that changes, that's part of the trust and understanding. And I guess our mistake was not putting it in a separate article.
Yeah.
And I want to say, like, on the school committee's part, there was no purposeful or direct act to break that trust. It happened. We weren't directly aware that that transfer happened.
Yes.
We have a new finance director currently, and we're hoping for more clarity in future situations.
But that does leave us with a very large gap because of that mistake.
Right.
And as I said before, what's frustrating now is, I know we're talking about this and we're trying to make it as clear as possible for the people who are gonna have to vote in a couple of weeks. But it's not just us, like, it doesn't matter what I
So
say now.
you want more clarity, is that what you're asking?
What I'm saying is, what's really important is, I know we're talking about this now, but it's not just us. When you go to that meeting on June 17th, at this point, it doesn't really matter how much, what we say about it, what the FinCom says, or the
Right,
select
right,
board, or
right.
the TA, okay? Because it's the actual town voters who have to understand this and vote for it. Because the only thing we can do, the thing we could have done before as a finance committee, but it's too late because we already voted the budget for the entire town a couple weeks ago, is if we had had these discussions much earlier, we would have been able to see where we could have made adjustments in the budget, get that tax increase lower. I mean, the impression I'm getting with the need of the schools, we were gonna have to probably do another tax increase from what you're saying. But we did not have opportunities for those discussions to dig into your budget, so that because for the budget that I saw earlier, there was no way I could vote for that, and somebody asked me, well, why did you approve that? Because didn't have the detail that we needed. We didn't have the discussions that we needed. And it's very frustrating, because I talk to parents, I talk to lots of people, they want to do the best. They love the schools, they love, I know some kids who just absolutely love being at the elementary school, how awesome it is, how awesome the principal is, the programs. It's not that we don't like it, but, as we're having these discussions, and I know we're really digging at you, but we're not the only ones. And as much clarity as you can get between now and June 17th, it's gonna be really important if you want a chance of it passing. So.
That makes sense. I'm just a little confused, because you keep saying we didn't have these conversations. You came to,
I came to get
Kristen.
I came to get more information.
and we gave you packets,
And you gave me a packet, but you didn't come to our meeting so we could discuss it, because
But
we had questions.
I wish you would have emailed the specific questions.
No, we need this sort of discussion.
Hey, sorry, Megan, I did. I repeatedly asked for a level services budget. I repeatedly asked an email for revenue picture. And I got crickets. I got no response.
We did send
Don't
a
sit here
letter.
tonight and say that we didn't ask. And the buck stops with you, Megan, you're chair of the school committee. Don't try to get somebody else on the firing line and say, oh, well, I didn't do it. oh, I didn't broker that deal. Well, you voted for it.
Mary,
Okay.
I
So-
don't have any emails from you
like this is
asking me
not
for any
productive. Scott, this is not
information. That was not
Right.
You don't. Well, then I guess something's wrong with your incoming email because I sent them.
All right, let's,
Scott, was that helpful to sit with Michael and go over those numbers? I don't know if that was.
well, it
beneficial.
was helpful to get some more information, right? I mean, trying to break down in the details of the Bridges program, because, I mean, like I said, I've, heard, a member of the school committee going, it's like, it's saving money, it's saving money, it's saving money, and there is no indication whether it is saving money or not saving money. That's what we don't know, and then if the information is put out there that, gives the impression of something that's not true, we need to know. Big elephant in the room, the whole thing, as I told you on Thursday, is this Bridges program, how that money was expended, right? And then how much money was expended this year. And if you look at how, because we're not talking just the 383, it was, the whole agreement was the 383 and the 350, additional 350 from the circuit breaker and school choice money, and the whole point was for covering that particular gap that we were hoping will, one, be something that would disappear, and two, if nothing else, we would also get some reimbursement the next year, because it's always the reimbursement from the state from the circuit breaker is the following year. So, I mean, our best wishes occurred was the fact that that expenses disappeared from the additional students leaving the district, and so that we ended up not having that particular spike. But then we don't really have a good accounting exactly how the rest of that money is spent, and we're looking at going, well, is that money tied up right now to in excess and deficiency? But in the meantime, we are going to sit here and go, we'll just let the taxpayers take the hit. I mean, one of the problems, I have watched the school, I've been part of this, attended some of the school committee meetings. I've watched several of the school committee meetings, and one of the things that has disturbed me a little bit is I do hear many references of talking about saying it's not about the cost, it's about what the schools actually need. And I think that's a big point here. It's a combination of the two. There is what they need, and there is what they cost. So, you talk about saying you want to keep students in their, with their peers. There are people that would like to be able to stay in their homes and be able to continue living in this town, right? So that's a particular piece that's also important. You can't be just looking at, it's all about the child. You also have to look at, you do have the others in town, so you have to include all of them.
Hey, Scott, Scott, there's something that I became aware of on circuit breaker. If your anticipated expenses for a given year are more than, I think it was 25% higher than the previous year expenses, you qualify for same year as the expenses incurred. You would qualify for special circuit breaker funding. And I think the situation at Berlin Memorial School going from fiscal 22 to 23 to 24, that we qualified going into 24 to have same year reimbursement on circuit breaker, as well as reimbursement for the previous year's expenses, which were also elevated. There's a lot of formulas around that circuit breaker funding, but I'm pretty sure we qualified at Berlin Memorial in fiscal 24 for both same year and previous year reimbursement. And the state published number for circuit breaker was $647,831. So we had significant state money coming in this year.
Mary, is that from the circuit breaker reimbursement? I'm sorry.
Yes. I attended the March 18 meeting of the school committee when the budget was voted. I pointed this out to people at that meeting because there was an error in the PowerPoint presentation, which is the budget that the school committee brought forward.
Go ahead, Julie.
And it was verified, Nancy Koniski verified it in the meeting that the state number was the number I just recited, and it's not the number that was printed in the budget.
It was
So,
like 200 and something.
so to your point, Scott, we need a deep dive into this revenue and to understand to really just understand the numbers in a transparent way. We don't have these numbers.
We just got a letter from Desi Mary, dated May 2nd, 2024, and it says, this is for the district, total relief reimbursements for circuit breaker are $351,120. So, $204,459 must be spent by June 30th, 2024, which it has been applied. And
That's that
then-
extraordinary relief.
That's what you were talking about, Mary, the extraordinary relief.
Well, there's the same year, and then there is the reimbursement for the prior year. But that has not been communicated to us in the town about how that impacts Berlin Memorial.
No, you're right,
And-
because what we talked about that, and again, I didn't do this budget. The way it was done was, it was applied directly to that line item. So the memo that Scott has with the detailed spreadsheet on the last page, those circuit breaker funds were applied to that very last line item, which is why it's so low, which is why you see that large savings, because it was applied to that out of district. It was all applied to that line item.
So the,
Okay, so I don't know what line item we're talking about. I've never seen these numbers in an
so
organized
what
fashion.
was applied for FY '25, the line item for out-of-district special education of 114? Ex-president showing 114, which,
Yeah, it's that, yeah, it was applied, so that 114 is net of the circuit breaker application. Whatever was applied, I don't know the number off the top of my head without, whatever amount from circuit breaker Nancy applied. That was all applied to that line item. And school choice was applied to the salaries line item, just general salaries. And it was 100,000 even for BMS, I do know that number off the top of my head.
right, so those were these numbers in the bottom half of this one. This is
Yes,
FY
yep,
25.
all right, yep, so the circuit breaker, 96,086, yep. And then this, I believe the sped grant was also applied to that line item too, wasn't it? I believe the sped grant was applied to that line item too.
Scott, I don't want to interrupt
Sure.
you, but there is another hand raised from Chris Keefe when you have a moment.
Okay, Chris,
I just want to agree with Mary that at the school committee meeting on May 10th, I did request a level services budget, and it would be for FY24 and FY25 if possible, and I'm still waiting, and I'm sure Mary is too. The information that we have at this point is not like we have been accustomed to receiving. We've been accustomed to receiving notebooks with information, not a PowerPoint, but numbers, line items.
is, I have a question here, is that the level services budget that was just sent out before the meeting?
Yeah.
The
that's
Berlin-
That I did.
Well, we had, this is,
No,
this was
it's
Berlin's,
not.
right?
Nope, it's not a
Sorry,
level
sorry.
service budget. That budget that was sent out before the meeting, Scott, includes, there's one head at Tohoto. It's a math teacher.
This is
about
the
85K.
financial literacy.
Yep, the finance, yep, it's the one head at Tohoto, and then there was a stipend we added, I think it was like $12,000. There was a stipend for it's essentially, we added a special, unified, thank you, Julie, it's called the Unified Coaches. It's essentially like a Special Olympics sports thing.
Okay, and how much you said that was?
Maybe-
12,000 or something?
11,000.
11, yeah.
Yeah,
Change,
11,
And then there was
okay.
the OT that was.
Scott, perhaps you could let them know what a level services budget is?
Yeah, I mean, that's the, is there something to demonstrate, to break down what would have been, you know, what those added costs were from, over the level services? I mean, if it's
Sorry,
only
say that
those,
again.
could you provide us the additional costs above those, since this isn't quite level services?
Right.
Would you be able to provide, no, obviously not right now, be able to provide us what those additional costs were and if, whatever line item that you, they would apply to? Okay, I mean, I think this point, I don't really have any more questions. All
right.
Do you have, Cliff, Julie,
No.
Mary?
Thanks, Scott. No, just as Chris said, we've been asking, I think we need to look at fiscal '23 level services into '24 and '24's level services into '25. If we're counting those 4 students at Berlin Memorial as part of level services, is that, I don't know, we need to see it without that factored in, I think. So, yeah, we need it, and we need a normal budget like other towns do.
I thought you guys said you had notebooks of information for FY '23. Nancy didn't do the budget for FY '23, that was Bob.
So Megan, my understanding is the school budget is the responsibility of the school committee.
To
So
approve.
I know that personalities, the people move in and out of these jobs, I understand it. We have not, Finance Committee, my experience, we have not had this issue in the past. And been a lot of changes in the school committee and changes in the district. So
And
I don't.
COVID fund.
I'm going to assume everybody's trying to do the right thing here, but the real message is we don't have what we need, and we've been asking for what we need. And so, Scott, I'm going to stop there because I know that we're at 9 o'clock. So thank you.
Right, well, thanks for coming. Just a moment here. I mean, one of the things, I don't want, these are the best discussions are the ones that sometimes can be most contentious. And this is much more important for us to have been here. And actually, this should have been in February, in my opinion. But we need to continue to have these discussions. And I don't care about anybody, not liking what maybe any of the tones or anything like that stuff on this is the only way we get to the information we need. So I don't want anybody discouraged by anything that was said here. The whole point is we need to have this, like I said, December, February next year. It definitely has to be there and then likewise, hopefully getting more information that's sent out of these level services budget in details. I think we know a lot of the information here you understand a lot of the information just we've been showing. I know what we get from Assabet. I know somebody's been emailing around comparing all the other towns' details of their budgets. We don't have to match everybody's on this, but I think we have an idea about these are the details that people expect, especially when you're going to go and ask them for a lot of money. And it's important for them to know you've actually done your due diligence on the financial side, and you also are taking into consideration the financial impact on the people that are going to have to pay this. And it's not just, students are important, but they're not the only item here that all consideration needs to be paid attention to. Everybody's involved on it.
That's a fair comment. And just so you know, we changed our calendar, so we're voting on the budget on February 25th next year.
Okay, and I'd like to have, even before you vote on it, we have further discussions and getting into those details. We don't wait until the vote. You have the information, whether it's the first week of February, second week of February, we need to have that discussion. We definitely have to have that.
And I'm hoping with a new director of finance, you guys are gonna get more transparency. Cliff, I don't think you ever did a budget when you were on the school committee. Did you ever prepare a budget?
By myself? No, absolutely not.
So, I mean, I think usually it comes from, when I started, Bob was the director of finance and he presented us intense spreadsheets. So I'm sure you guys had all of that information. Nancy was more of a PowerPoint person. A lot of the stuff, like you said, we discussed in meetings, and she had lots of supplemental documentation that never made its way onto the website, probably never made its way to you guys. So that is something next year the district needs to do better at is, I bet you if you had a bunch of her supplemental spreadsheets, a lot of this would make much better sense. Whether we can agree or disagree on how the money's spent, that's another thing, to your point. But yes, I agree, you need the way the information is presented might need some work. So,
Okay.
all right.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I will let somebody have a question here. If you want to stay around for it, that's fine. I don't.
I just have a question on this, the fiscal year, the amount that's at the top for fiscal year '24, the $5,283,791.
when I go back to the town report, the amount is $4,775,559. So I just wanna know where that discrepancy is
That's
from.
expense, and the amount on the town report is probably the assessment.
Okay.
You would actually go by, I have another sheet, you can look at the, break down the revenue numbers.
can
and
add
how
in
it
the
adds up.
revenue,
It'll
and
come
then
off,
you'll
it'll be
get
off
back.
by $1, but it will.
Okay.
Thank you for
Thank you.
coming. Thank you for coming
Thanks, guys.
tonight.
All right, thank you.
All of you.
Scott, are you okay if I take a screenshot of this?
Oh, sure.
Work together unless.
Okay, so, I mean, that was our item for, the
So-
only item for the agenda, right?
So do we want to schedule another meeting at this point?
Can
or-
I do a little report?
Oh, yeah, sure.
I know I'm not on the agenda, but I did attend, they invited a member of the finance committee to attend this interviews of potential finance directors.
Yes.
Mhm.
And there was an interview today, and I participated. That's about all I can say, but I want you to know I was there.
Oh, thank
Okay.
you.
Excellent.
Thanks, Cliff.
Yeah, they did reach this, well, Carol did reach out to the finance committee to ask if we wanted to participate, if a member could, and Cliff took them up on their offer, so, thank you.
I probably should also say it's a very representative group. But, for every Berlin person, there was a Boylston person, so it was good. It's a good group.
All right, so the real question is, do we need another meeting, and where are we, where are we gonna sit? I mean, right now, it's like the information is, I mean, we got some more information. I don't think anything that's, pleasing for most people, especially, the whole way the additional funds were expended and how they're continuing to be rolled over into the future here.
Do we have to make a recommendation? Or should we wait until just
We
for town?
can wait until, I mean, first of all, we just got additional information from Tohoto, and Carol's gonna get us the additional above line items.
I mean,
on
had this
that.
info dumped tonight, which
Yes.
is like,
So-
Yes.
I think,
Yeah,
guys, I think without without the level services budget information, I'm nowhere near a place to make a recommendation. So, the information is still incomplete. It's still spotty, and hard to assemble it to understand. So, I don't. Did you say it, Julie? We might want to schedule a meeting ahead of the just before the June 17 meeting to come to a recommendation. So if we get what we need,
Yeah,
But we would need, because this is there is so much information here, and we really haven't covered Tohoto, would we really want to meet next Wednesday or the following Wednesday if we could get that information?
my calendar says we're meeting next Wednesday.
Oh, I haven't, oh, that's right. I
That
didn't-
was a tentative
That
proposed.
was a tentative one, yeah.
all right, well, since it's on
Oh.
there, let's leave it. Are you
Yeah.
available next Wednesday, Mary?
yeah, I'm back in town, so I can actually, you can see me go on in person.
Whoa!
Okay, so I think that one of the questions to think about is, I mean, right now, I mean, going forward, at the moment, you're looking at what the schools are gonna propose for their budget. And is there something, I mean, obviously, we already, recommended something which was, and that number was approved by the voters. We know they were, okay with that number. Do we, consider anything of, providing an alternative even that's in between where we're at right now? Because basically, it's gonna come down to one vote otherwise, right? It's gonna be whatever the school has placed there is going to be, that's the motion, and that's the vote. Or do we look at something and say, as much as, schools say, it's like, well, they can't figure out, do they have all this excess and deficiency, because we can't figure out how the money's being spent, and, do we look at something that's, less and gives the voters a different choice?
Well, my thing, if we can get to the point that we have an understanding of this budget, and then we have an understanding that we can come up with a realistic alternative number, I'm fine with doing that. But if we're not, if we still feel like we don't have enough information to make that determination, I don't think it doesn't seem right to just have another number unless we feel like it's justifiable.
Based on data.
Yeah, based on data, because we're also in the position that we already did have town meeting and people already did vote for a budget.
Yes.
So we're, it's.
Julie, I think, well spoken, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, I agree with Julie as well, yeah.
Yes, Kyle?
So, just a point of clarification. Go up to the mic. Peg tells me to go to the mic.
Because they keep doing.
Okay, just a point of clarification. My understanding, we're a regional district under the Massachusetts Regional District portion of DESI, which means our budget is not, the town cannot modify the school committee budget. The town has the option to vote yes for the school committee budget or no for the school committee budget, but legally we don't have the ability to alter the number. So what happened at town was not correct, and what we are left with was in fact a no vote, so 0 budget for the town. So it's not a modified number from town is a thought, but it's inappropriate based on the legal aspects, at least that I've learned, about what DESI and the Massachusetts Regional Board of, Education stuff does.
So Kyle, let me jump in there, because the school committee does have the power. The school committee can meet and vote to accept the budget the town gave them.
They can,
Right, so that's why it's not.
And the question is, why don't they?
because, because.
Why are we being drug into a special town meeting? They have the power to make this go away.
It's not enough.
But the point is, though, what you just said, that was inappropriate. There was nothing inappropriate about that was done on
That's not the
anything.
right word, but it's
But
not
there was no-
illegal. I don't know what the word is.
No,
It's incorrect.
It was, everything, the school's budget was presented, and in the end, it was voted down, but another budget was approved. And one of the things that, and this is where part of the fear-mongering has also come about in this stuff, is immediately everything was being spread out there. Is like, well, even the talk was saying we have to go to immediately to a 2-town meeting, which was not the case, and nobody pointed out from the schools and was that they could just go back and accept that budget. So they always made it that there was no other alternative. It had to be another whole town meeting on this type of stuff, and that's not the case. And that's why you can modify the budget, and if it's approved, and when the schools go back, the school committee can accept what was approved by the town. So there was nothing.
And this is the other problem too that I was trying to bring up earlier. We're all here talking about this. We're a very small number of the people who are going to be voting.
Well, we're representative of the people who are talking to us, yes. Like, I'm on the soccer fields every day, I'm in the schools every day,
Yeah,
I
but-
agree.
No, but what I'm saying is that Cliff and I don't hang out. I don't hang out with Mary. I don't hang out with Scott. I don't hang out with, well, Kristen doesn't actually live in town.
I don't hang out with
But I
anybody.
have a small group of people that I hang out with. Everybody else is different groups that they hang out with. But that doesn't really matter, because when it comes to this town meeting, we're here digging into this. But no matter what the recommendation is that we make, in a way, the people that have to be convinced that this is the right thing to do
Are the voters.
is the entire
Yes.
town that shows up to vote. Because we have we don't have, what's the word for it? Because
Representative town meeting?
yeah.
No, it's direct
We
democracy.
don't have power.
We have basically we have power as the individual to show up and
Right.
talk about it. And we also have power to anybody can make an amendment on the floor at that meeting.
Yeah.
It's not just us. And that's what's kind of different from other places that people may have lived. So, as I said, this is part of the process. This is part of the process of explaining to people what's going on. But in the end, it's going to be up to whoever shows up at that town meeting.
Yeah, and this is, going back to having the people have the opportunity to vote on this. I know, there's, again, you hear the chatter of the people complaining now that, is the next vote coming late in the process, or people aren't around for this type of stuff. There was an opportunity, which was the motion from the Finance Committee, to take this to a paper ballot. People could have voted early, that everything would have been lined up. They wouldn't have to worry about being there that night and all the other type of stuff. And unfortunately, it wasn't really intended to get to the people. And others advocated not to take it to a paper ballot and not to get the biggest voice they could possibly get on the vote. And as a result, that ended up getting shot down just barely, and then we ended up having a vote with a small number of people. I mean, this is, even with this next town meeting, it's still going to be a smaller percentage of people than if we had taken this to a paper ballot, because of the convenience that a paper ballot would have had on this. So I'd hope in the future that the schools do not advocate to to shoot down an opportunity to take it to a ballot if they come back with a large number again, and we'd like to take this to an override vote, because that has just caused this thing to be a much more difficult if they had also agreed, because basically in the people that spoke on that meeting, it was very clear that those that were most worried about the tax impact were for a paper ballot, and those that just wanted to push through the school budget were not favor of paper ballot and wanted to just push it through at that meeting, with a very small percentage of voters making that decision. So I hope in the future we will open that up to more and not try and shoot that down. I mean, it was also disturbing to me when you even had somebody get up there. It felt like it was like rerunning the 2020 election, when somebody gets up there as an attorney that tries to put doubt into whether or not it'd be legal to actually take this to a paper ballot and try to shove it through. I mean, that was a little disturbing, I thought, to have that even in our own town, that somebody's trying to make it, put doubt as to whether it would even be a legal vote to take that to a paper ballot. That was definitely not a cool thing to do.
If I could just add, Scott, we did extensive research prior to presenting the budget, and, we didn't want to have to present two different budgets. We are allowed to. We do have to present what the school committee's requested budget is, always, in the warrant. That is correct. We have been advised recently by DESE that moving forward, particularly to eliminate confusion, we should be voting on a one-line item budget, as we discussed at the last meeting, a bottom line number. It can be broken down in the description, but the ultimate vote should be on the number. I'm always honest. And so that's,
But is that specifically how does it? Because when I was with Carol on Thursday, we watched the webinar that was put on live on what happens with the next step after this was defeated. And they mentioned that they know that through tradition that many towns break that out like we have it broken out. And they did not encourage in any way that you should be doing it a different way. That if that's what people are used to doing and that's how they would like to see it, there was nothing that they put out saying you should not be doing it that way. They said they know how people are doing it, and that's perfectly fine.
So we were advised by Christine Lynch, who's a director at DESE, and I don't know exactly which division is, but she's pretty high up in DESE, that, you can break it out in a description, and there has been a tradition of doing that, but they strongly encouraged us to do it as a bottom line budget. And I understand that has been tradition here. I think that caused some of the confusion this year, and I think that's one thing that we could do moving forward on our side that would be helpful. I mean, and we can certainly check and talk again, but I mean, this is, Chris Keefe and I, and actually Lynn Ryan spoke with DESE about it.
Mary,
So.
did you have something?
Yeah, just Kristen, I think we sit between DESE and the Department of Revenue on this question, and I think the Department of Revenue, if we're using different funding sources, I think that needs to be pretty clear to the public when they vote. So I get your point, as long as we have the descriptor in the warrant.
Yes.
That there could be a single vote on the total number, but I think from the Department of Revenue guidelines, that we really want that broken out when we're using the capital projects. How are we going to fund it? Is it a bond? Is it free? What are we doing? I think it really needs to be the way we've done it, but not necessarily voting separately on the two numbers.
Right, because we do not have the legal authority to line item the school department's budget by school.
Well, right, but actually, we're not getting anywhere near a line item. These are capital projects that are in our other budget line.
Right, but we're breaking it out by operating capital debt and the two different schools. So ultimately, what does matter is the bottom line number. Yeah.
I see cross-district number.
Correct, because, and I think some of this confusion came with the fact that the elementary schools were folded in later into the district agreement, and it was always sort of, the two communities had their own way of Boylston and Berlin doing their budgets, and it sort of, at least for us, I can't speak for Boylston, but it stayed the way that it was in the town's budget. But, they made it pretty clear that we needed to vote on one bottom line number.
I mean, I look at the, breaking it down though, as having the separate capital line items for each of the schools and both separate operating number, because it also provides more clarity when the voters do have an objection to something, that they can send the message more clear to the school committee of what they object. When you just do one bottom line number, all of a sudden it sounds like more like a congressional omnibus package, trying to just combine it all together and see where it all falls out there.
Right.
And, I personally, I would discourage from us trying to go to just a single line item like that, because it doesn't, again, it loses transparency. And we want transparency.
Right. And we
Um,
would definitely do it in the description. I think the issue, though, is that once we became a fully regional district, it is the bottom line number that gets voted on.
Interesting.
I reached out to Desi because I wanted to get that clarification directly on it, and we can certainly have some further conversations around it.
Interesting. So people.
I know people don't like it. I get it.
No, I'm just thinking, so if the descriptors are there,
Yeah.
how are people gonna argue about the descriptors?
You can't really.
They can't.
Exactly. That's the point, is you lose that ability to, basically indicate what you have displeasure with.
Huh.
And I think you have that better the way it is now. And like I said, otherwise it seems like, what everybody complains about Congress doing is just throwing it all together and throwing out the door, and that exactly, to me, that's what that combines that thing into, and lets hide things around here. But that'll be a discussion we'll have for next year.
Yes.
All right.
You have
Any
someone in the
other-
audience with their hands raised.
There is somebody in the audience?
Yes. Melissa?
Sure, we can,
Hi, Melissa Broder, South Street. I just had a question going back to the comment about the paper ballot. I'm just curious, if that had gone that route, what would the process actually have been? Would we have had to vote on that at the town meeting? Then how long would that take to get it all set up and then count the votes? Would that have all been done in the time frame before the teachers would need to be pink slipped on June 15th? Was that even a viable option? Because you keep talking
Yes,
about
it
it
was
as if it
viable.
was a viable option.
yeah, I'll turn it over to Kristen. She had the numbers on that.
So it takes 35 days to call a special election, so that could have been done before June 15th. It's tight, but it could have been done. The next step would have been for the select board to hold a meeting 48 hours after town meeting, and they're the only body that can call for an override election. So if it was something that was passed at town meeting does the actual appropriation of the funds via override, but the actual vote to tax in excess of Proposition 2.5 has to go to a ballot, and the select board are the only people that can put it on a ballot or submit that request. So, like I said, it would be a tight process, but it was something that we had thought through.
Yeah, and it would have been actually slightly a few days before the process, because this was a tight process too. But this was 45 days after the school committee did theirs, which was the next day. So it would have been 35 days from the school committee within their 48 hours of making it. So yes, it would have been done earlier, and it would have been the convenience of voters being able to vote early, and because it would have been a known thing on the ballot. It's not something that would have changed. And so it would have been much more convenient, and we know it would have, as these things typically are, much more voter turnout.
Right, and you would have immediately had a budget, because the way that that was drafted was you had either the fallback contingent upon the town meeting, or you had the, I'm sorry, I misspoke. You either would have the override, which would allow the Proposition 2.5 to go through, but you still had the town meeting vote on the budget. So at that point, the school committee could make that decision to accept the town's budget, or we could go through this process. It would depend on how the school committee wanted to move after that point.
Okay, I think we're done. So motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
All right, roll call. Scott, aye.
Cliff, aye.
Very aye.
Julie, I.
All right.